Oh, I almost forgot to take this crap off. Tired of this 2020 mask crap, man. That's enough already. Hello there, what is up? I am Rafael de Furia, back at it again on another Friday night. This week, bringing you the latest update from the Italian government. And I'm going to be just paraphrasing from the press release of the Council of Ministers, number 66, released on October 7th, 2020, from the meeting which took place at Palazzo Chigi. Anyway, before we get too much deeper into this video, if you would like to see more content about moving to Italy, Italian dual citizenship, and living life abroad, be sure that you're subscribed to this channel for more. And of course, a huge thank you to those of you who help to make videos like this possible through Patreon. Your help is truly appreciated. Anyway, this week's video is probably going to be a little bit on the shorter side in comparison with usual. But basically, to get straight down to business, the extension of the state of emergency has been pushed up to January 31st, 2021. If you see me looking off camera, I'm reading bits and pieces. I've created some bullet points to talk off of for this video. But then also the measures to fight against the COVID-19 contagion. This is probably the one part where most news sources in Italy are probably talking about it the most. From what I'm seeing, it doesn't really seem to be that different, at least with how things have been done here in the region where I live. But if you read through it, it is interesting to see that not only do you have to wear masks if you go into places, but if you can't socially distance, that you also had to wear a mask, but it's required to carry a mask with you, to have some sort of PPE with you at all times, which I found quite interesting. Okay, it makes sense that if you're going into a place, it's not clear to me what the situation would be if for some reason you get stopped on the street and you don't have some sort of respiratory protection device of some kind. So what does that involve? Of course, if you're in a place where you're not able to socially distance and not actually following the rules, of course, there are fines that can come into place. But if you're in a place where you're not actually close to anybody and you don't have a mask with you, I'm curious what would happen in that sort of situation. But anyway, the masks not only have to be worn in closed places accessible to the public, but also in outdoor public areas where you're unable to socially distance. But if you are with people that you live with, that you cohabitate with, then the situation changes a little bit. But if you're talking about private homes and outdoor spaces, then this becomes a little bit of a different situation. Outdoor spaces where you can distance from one another. It seems as though really what it comes down to is it's pretty much what it was before, that it is masks are required in a place where you can't socially distance. But if you're in a place where you are able to socially distance and it's not a private home, then the situation changes. But before this new extension was released this week, people in the news all over the country were talking about, well, what's the situation going to be? There was some idea floating around that they were going to actually limit the hours which places could be open depending on the numbers. They were talking about whether it would be 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, depending on how things go. And even here in the local news in my town, they interviewed one of the restaurant owners, and they were saying in their opinion that they found it to be a ridiculous idea, because by people not spending time in those bars or restaurants or so on, they'll just go and find other places to spend time together. So he found it to be a bit ridiculous. But the night before that these new measures were released, if I'm not mistaken, Giuseppe Conte actually put it out that this leak of sorts, quotes, doing it behind the mic, this leak was actually incorrect, and this was not something that they were considering, because some of the measures that they're taking now are very much taking into consideration the economic impact. Also, they've learned a lot this year. The whole world has learned a lot this year. What can happen to a country, what is necessary, what is not necessary. But then also on top, I happened to look at the numbers today, and interestingly enough, the new numbers that we're seeing now seem to be very similar to where we were at about maybe mid-March. I think somewhere between March 15th to 18th. I think the numbers are like So that, of course, is definitely concerning. And one of the things that they are actually continuing to talk about is that, even actually in this update, they said that if regions and areas feel like they need to make further restrictions, that they are allowed to do it, but they have to have a base national level of restrictions. Nobody can loosen up at a lower standard than what has been required nationally. But the other thing that I've been hearing talks about would be mini lockdowns, and what that exactly would entail to me isn't so clear, and I haven't found a good answer in regards to what would be considered that mini lockdown. I'm assuming, though, based on what we saw earlier this year when we saw a few cities and towns and regions locked down, I would take a wild guess that that's what it could be talking about, and it wouldn't be something necessarily so beyond that. But I'm wondering, would they lock down maybe a part of a city in some larger, more urban areas? Or would they actually lock down the whole city to begin with? I can't help but wonder about that. I doubt that would be the case, but it would be interesting to see. I hope it never gets to the point where we actually do need to see, of course, because that would mean there would be some really bad things happening. And yeah, one lockdown was way more than enough. Not ready to return to that. Officials here in Italy are talking about that the numbers do seem to be going up, and they are expecting them to only get higher. But if you look at the graphs of where we were back in March versus where we are now, this growth seems to be more gradual than it was earlier this year, whereas earlier it was a much faster, bigger spike. I can't help but wonder if that's just because of the testing and how that was rolled out, and how there's just more awareness of the situation and what's going on now. And of course, with people being concerned and knowing what steps to take now, is it just that there's a lot more testing, or is it that just because of people maybe getting a bit more relaxed than they were, that it's been a slower growth, but still almost seeming to be steady? But I personally can't help but wonder what really are the right steps in this situation, because there has been the discussion of what masks actually protect against what. There have been discussions that say that the masks protect those around you, not necessarily you yourself. And of course, if we're talking about the virus itself, it's much smaller than what most masks can actually protect against. So I'm personally concerned and wondering what really are the right steps to take. Do we really need to have mass production of better masks rather than the cloth masks that are out there? Of course, I'm not asking for that. I would prefer not to have to wear a mask. I do it because it's necessary, not because I enjoy it. And if it's required, then that's one thing. But if I were given the option, then I would say, okay, I would probably be following these kind of guidelines that are talked about here in Italy. Whereas if I am going to be close to someone, okay, I'll wear a mask. If we're talking about the rules themselves, I think it's reasonable. It's a shame that it's necessary, and it's very sad that it's necessary. But if I were going to talk about what I would be personally doing, I would say, yeah, I would probably just a decent person, or someone who tries to be a decent person, I would probably be doing that same thing. That if I'm going to be near someone, that fine, I'll put the mask on, but I would prefer not to have to. And very much, I am very, very fed up of this whole situation that we've been facing this year, and I'm very ready to get over it and get through it so that we can move on. This whole year has been definitely not the way that any of us imagined. This year, I had some very big plans of what I was going to do and where I was going to take things, not only with my YouTube, but also with my work, and the direction I was wanting to go with that. And definitely 2020 has gotten in the way of that. So I am very ready to see how that could be possible moving forward at a later date. But let's see. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this little update here on what is currently the situation here in Italy, because I felt this week it was necessary to quickly go over this, because there has been a lot of talk in the Italian media and some international media, not as much, but a lot of expats in Italy have been talking about what's going on and wanting to know what the situation is hopefully this has cleared up some of it for some of you who have been wondering about that, and for those of you who are living outside of Italy and haven't had that same access to information or haven't found that same information. I hope this has been helpful to keep you updated on what is happening here so that you can make your plans if you are in fact deciding to come here. As always, huge, gigantic thank you to those of you who are helping to make these videos possible through Patreon. Your support, your continued support to help allow these videos to come out is greatly appreciated. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And of course, I am Rafael di Furia, and I will see you all next time. Later.